The Siren's Lake. Jack heard beautiful singing coming from the lake. He got in his boat to find the singer. As he rowed out, the singing got louder. It was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. In the middle of the lake, he saw her, a beautiful woman with long, flowing hair. She reached out to him, still singing. Jack leaned over the boat, mesmerized. As he got closer, he saw her eyes. They were black and empty. Her mouth opened wider and wider, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jack tried to row away, but it was too late. Webbed hands grabbed his boat, pulling him into the dark water. The beautiful singing turned into a horrifying screech as Jack was dragged down into the depths. The cave that breathes explorers found a strange cave in the mountains. It seemed to breathe, the entrance expanding and contracting. A team went in to investigate. As they went deeper, they felt like they were being watched. The cave walls pulsed like a heartbeat. They were wet and warm to the touch. Suddenly, the passage behind them closed. The cave was swallowing them. They ran deeper, looking for another way out, but every turn led to a dead end. The cave's breaths got faster. The walls closed in. The explorers realized too late. They weren't in a cave. They were being digested. Outside, other explorers only found equipment scattered at the cave's entrance. The cave's mouth was tightly shut, like a stomach full after a satisfying meal. The Forest of Mirrors. Lisa got lost in a strange part of the forest. The trees here had smooth, reflective bark like mirrors. She saw her reflection everywhere she looked, but something was wrong. The reflections moved differently. As Lisa walked, her reflections stayed still, watching her. Their eyes followed her every move. She started to run. The reflections ran too, but towards her, their hands reaching out of the trees. Lisa screamed as cold hands grabbed her. She was pulled into the mirror-like surface of a tree. Now, hikers sometimes see a girl in the reflection of those strange trees. She pounds on the surface, silently screaming for help. The sea of lost souls. The old sailor warned them not to go out to sea that night, but the young couple didn't listen. As they sailed under the full moon, they heard voices in the waves. Sad, lonely voices calling out. Pale hands reached up from the water, grabbing at their boat. Faces appeared in the waves, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. The couple tried to turn back, but their boat wouldn't move. The sea was pulling them down.
As water filled the boat, the voices got louder. "Join us," they said. "Be part of the sea forever." The next morning, their empty boat washed ashore.
But on quiet nights, two new voices can be heard calling from the waves. The living forest rangers found a new species of tree in the old forest. The trees had red sap that looked like blood. Scientists came to study the trees. They set up camp in the forest. At night, they heard strange noises. It sounded like the trees were moving. One scientist went to check. He never came back. In the morning, they found his equipment. It was covered in red sap. And there was a new tree where he had been. As they tried to leave, roots burst from the ground, wrapping around their legs. The trees were hungry, and the scientists were their prey. Now the forest is quarantined, but it keeps growing, fed by those who dare to enter. The Whispering Forest. Tom loved hiking. One day he went into the old forest alone. The trees were tall and dark. As he walked deeper, he heard whispers. At first he thought it was the wind, but the whispers got louder. They were saying his name. Tom tried to find his way back, but the trees all looked the same. The whispers got louder and louder. Suddenly he saw faces in the tree bark. They were moving, their mouths forming his name. He ran, but the trees seemed to move. Their branches reached for him, scratching his skin. The whispers turned into screams. Tom felt the ground give way beneath him. He fell into darkness, surrounded by the screaming trees. The forest had swallowed him whole. Now, hikers sometimes hear whispers in that forest. If they listen closely, they might hear Tom's voice, begging to be freed. The Hungry Lake. Sarah loved swimming in the old lake. One hot day, she dove in as usual, but something felt different. The water was colder than normal, and it felt thicker, like it was grabbing at her. She tried to swim back to shore, but the water pulled her down. Sarah panicked, thrashing in the water. That's when she saw them. Faces in the water. Pale, bloated faces with wide, hungry mouths. Hands reached up from the depths, grabbing her legs. Sarah screamed, but water filled her mouth. The lake was pulling her down into the darkness, where the hungry faces waited. On the shore, her friends found only her towel. The lake's surface was calm, hiding its dark secret below. The Cave of Echoes. Mike and his friends found a cave during their camping trip. They decided to explore it. As they went deeper, they heard echoes, but the echoes weren't their voices. They were screams. The flashlights flickered and died. In the darkness, the screams got louder. They felt cold hands touching them. Mike's friends ran, but he was frozen in fear. He felt something breathe on his neck. A voice whispered, "Welcome home." It sounded just like him. Mike's friends waited outside the cave for hours. When they finally went for help, they heard Mike's voice echoing from the cave, but it wasn't calling for help. It was inviting them back in. The mist from the sea. The small coastal town woke to a strange mist rolling in from the sea. It was thick and gray, and it brought an odd smell. As the mist covered the town, people started to disappear. Those who walked into the mist never came back out. From the mist came sounds, whispers, giggles, screams. Sometimes people saw shapes moving in it, shapes that weren't human. The townspeople locked themselves in their homes, but the mist seeped through cracks and keyholes.
One by one, the houses fell silent. The mist claimed everyone. When it finally cleared, the town was empty. But sometimes on foggy days, people passing by hear voices calling from empty streets.
The Forest of Lost Children. Every year a child went missing in the old forest. The townspeople searched, but they never found anyone. One day, little Emma went into the forest. She saw a group of children playing. They invited her to join. As Emma played, she noticed something strange. The children never laughed, and their eyes were all black. She tried to leave, but the children grabbed her. Their hands were cold as ice. "You're one of us now," they said. Their voices sounded old and hollow. Emma's parents searched for days. All they found was her doll at the edge of the forest. Now there's one more child playing in those woods with black eyes and a hollow voice. The Lonely Swing. There was an old playground near Tom's house. No one ever played there. The rusty swing always moved on its own. One day, Tom heard laughter coming from the playground. He saw a little girl on the swing. She waved at him to come play. Tom went to the playground, but it was empty. The swing was still moving. That night, he heard tapping on his window. The little girl was there, smiling. "Come play with me," she said. Tom's mom couldn't see the girl. She said he was imagining things, but every night the girl came back. She looked sadder each time. "Please come play," she begged. One night Tom followed her to the playground. She sat on the swing. Her feet didn't touch the ground. "Push me," she said. Tom did. As the swing went higher, the girl faded away. Tom felt cold hands push him onto the swing. Now, 2 swings moved by themselves in the old playground. The hungry closet. Lily hated her closet. Strange noises always came from it at night. Scratching, whispering, giggling. Her parents said it was just the house settling, but Lily knew better. One night, she saw the closet door open by itself. Long, skinny arms reached out, feeling around the room. Lily hid under her blanket. She felt something grab her foot. She was pulled towards the closet. Inside, she saw hundreds of glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Lily screamed as she was dragged into the darkness. The closet door slammed shut. Her parents found her room empty in the morning, but sometimes they hear Lily's voice coming from the closet, begging to be let out. The Scary Storybook. Jake found an old book in the attic. The stories inside were scary, but he couldn't stop reading. Each night he read a new story, and each night he had terrible nightmares about the monsters in the book. One night he read about a monster that ate children while they slept. That night, Jake woke up to see the monster standing over his bed. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The monster's mouth opened wide, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake felt himself being pulled towards the monster's mouth. He grabbed the book and threw it at the creature. The monster vanished. But now, there was a new story in the book. It was about a boy named Jake who found a scary book in his attic. The Bottomless Bathtub. Amy's new house had a weird bathtub. The water always drained slowly, making gurgling noises. One night, Amy was taking a bath when she felt something grab her foot. She looked down and saw a hand coming out of the drain. She tried to get out, but more hands appeared. They pulled her down. Amy screamed as she was dragged into the drain. She found herself in a dark, watery world full of pale, hungry faces. The next day, her parents couldn't find her. But sometimes, they hear splashing and screaming coming from the empty bathtub.
The whispering tree. The old tree in Sarah's backyard always gave her the creeps. Its branches looked like claws reaching for her window. One night, she heard whispers coming from outside. She looked out and saw the tree's branches moving. They spelled out words, "Let us in." Sarah closed the curtains and hid under her blanket, but the whispers got louder. The next night, the branches scratched at her window. "Let us in," they whispered again. This went on for weeks. Sarah couldn't sleep. The tree's whispers filled her head day and night. One stormy night, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She opened the window. "Fine," she shouted. "Come in." The branches shot into her room, wrapping around her arms and legs. They pulled her out the window. Sarah screamed as the tree swallowed her whole. The whispers stopped. In the morning, Sarah's parents found her bed empty. Outside, the old tree had a new, human-shaped knot in its trunk. The hungry shadows Max always felt like the shadows in his room were watching him. They seemed to move when he wasn't looking. One night, he saw a shadow detach itself from the wall. It slithered across the floor towards his bed. Max pulled the covers over his head. He felt something cold touch his foot. When he looked, the shadow was at the foot of his bed. It had no face, but Max knew it was hungry. He tried to run, but more shadows peeled off the walls. They surrounded him, their dark forms reaching for him. Max felt their cold touch all over. They were pulling him into the darkness. He tried to scream, but the shadows filled his mouth. His parents found his room empty the next morning, but sometimes they see a boy-shaped shadow on the wall, reaching out for help. The smiling painting. Emma's grandma left her an old painting. It showed a man with a creepy smile. Emma didn't like it, but she hung it up anyway. That night, she woke up feeling watched. The man in the painting was looking right at her. His smile was wider. Emma told herself it was just her imagination, but every night the man's smile got bigger. His eyes followed her around the room. One night, Emma heard a ripping sound. The man's hand was coming out of the painting. She tried to run, but her door was locked. The man stepped out of the frame, his smile now impossibly wide. "I've been waiting so long," he said, reaching for her with paint-stained hands. Emma's scream was cut short as the man pulled her into the painting. Now there's a new figure in the background, a girl with terrified eyes.
The rocking chair. The old rocking chair creaked in the attic, back and forth, but no one was sitting in it. Tommy heard it every night. His parents said it was just the wind, but he knew better. He'd seen the old woman who rocked in that chair. One night, Tommy crept up to the attic. The rocking stopped. In the moonlight, he saw her. Pale skin, hollow eyes, long white hair. She smiled at him, showing rotting teeth. "Come here, child," she whispered. Her bony finger beckoned him closer. Tommy's feet moved on their own. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The old woman's arms opened wide. As he got closer, her skin began to peel away. Underneath was nothing but bones. Tommy wanted to run, but he couldn't move. The old woman grabbed him. Her touch was ice cold. She pulled him onto her lap. The rocking chair creaked louder and louder. Tommy felt his life draining away. The old woman cackled as she rocked faster and faster. In the morning, Tommy's parents found the attic empty. Just an old rocking chair, gently swaying in the breeze. The forgotten doll. Lily found the doll in the basement. It was old and dusty, with a cracked porcelain face. Its eyes seemed to follow her. She cleaned it up and put it on her shelf. That night, she woke up to a soft voice. "Play with me," it said. Lily looked around. The doll was on her bed, staring at her. She put it back on the shelf and went to sleep. The next night, she woke up again. The doll was closer. "Play with me," it said louder. This went on for days. Each night, the doll got closer, and its voice got angrier. One night, Lily woke up to find the doll sitting on her chest. Its eyes glowed red. "You should have played with me," it growled. The doll's mouth opened wider and wider. Lily tried to scream, but no sound came out. The doll lunged at her face, swallowing her whole. In the morning, Lily's mom found an old dusty doll on her daughter's empty bed. Its smile seemed a little wider than before. The hungry mirror. Jake hated the old mirror in his room. His reflection always seemed off, like it moved a second too late. One night, he woke up to a tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the mirror. He looked and saw his reflection waving at him. But Jake wasn't waving. The reflection pressed its hands against the glass. The mirror began to ripple like water. A hand reached out. Jake tried to run, but he couldn't move. The hand grabbed his arm and pulled. Jake felt himself being sucked into the mirror. On the other side, it was dark and cold. He saw faces pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. His reflection stood in his room, smiling. It waved goodbye as Jake pounded on the glass. The next morning, Jake's mom came into his room. She saw him sleeping peacefully and smiled, but when she looked closer, she noticed his smile was just a little too wide.